and welcome to Discovering Dataflix. I'm a bit constrained today, but I think that's what we're going to talk about. Last week I did some constraints in the delete procedure, but today we're going to look a little bit deeper in how to work with constraints and uh, see what we can do. Um, just go over to the computer and have a look. First of all, we're going to look at one of the things that we could change to improve what we did on the last week's video with the delete stuff. And then I've created a special view where I want to highlight how the constraints are being used. And in the end, I'm going to show you a problem I'm actually facing right now in one of my applications, and the kind of hacky solution that I figured out so far. And if you have any solutions for me, I would love to hear any suggestions that could help. But let's start with the first one. This is where we ended last week. We can see the item and we have the test location that is deleted. If I click here, I can see the item 1. So what we want to do now is we actually don't want to use this procedure on constraint. We don't want to blank this because we actually want this to be valid if it should appear somewhere. And we don't want to push this out to every single view. So instead, we can go into the item and set something called PP inherit constraints to false. And we can see that if we comment this out and run the application, you can see that in this pop-up view, we get test 1, but in the main view, we get the cannot refine records again. So now we don't want to inherit constraints from the location onto the item. And now if I go in here and pick up the item, we get the item again. So that's really nice. But we don't want to update the views. So what we can do is we can actually move this down to the data dictionary. So I'm just going to put it here in the global data dictionary, and in the pop-up view, we also have this empty on constraint. We can actually remove that and then recompile. And now we still get the item here. We can still open the item here, and we have removed so far 4 lines of code and replaced it with 1 in a central place. So if this is something that is useful, then it's a good approach to take if you don't depend on filtering the locations. So now let's move on to the new view I created. And here I just used the HTML list, HTML web list, as you can see down here. I just used a new component HTML list where I set up some divs, and then in the CSS, I do some styling here. And not going to go into that, but if you want to see more of how to style these things, I'd love to make some videos about that as well. Just write it in the comments below, and I'll have a look and see if there's something you want me to do. So here we can look at the locations, and down here we see the items. So let's see if we go into our constraints view, we see that we have an unconstrained procedure here in the
the location, and we have a constraint in the item. So what we can do now is we can constrain and say that, well, I want to constrain all the items where the item dot the location ID equals 3. So let's run that. Oh no, constraint should have equals like the letters. And now we constrained this to be 3, but we still got all the locations in the list here. So we want to constrain on the locations instead. And so we copy this one, we comment it out, and we go to the locations view. And now it's not the item, it's the location, and it's not the location underscore ID, it's the location dot ID. And that should be 3, and see what that does. Now we got this 3 here, but we got the entire list of items. And yes, that is because we have moved the inherit constraints and set it to false in our data dictionary. So we actually need to go in here and set it to true, because we actually want, for the purpose of this video here, we actually want this to work. We want it to constrain. So see what happens now. Now we only got the 2 items that was in the wardrobe, and we get the wardrobe because the constraints of the parent is inherited into the child item. So far, so good. And now we can also set like constrain location. Let's see, item counter is greater or equals than 5. And now we get all the locations where we have more than 5 items, and all the locations where we have less than five items, we just ignore. And that is also applied to the below half here. We can also do this using SQL filters. Let's see how that works. We have the location item. It should be greater or equal than 5. And we should get the same result. And we get the same result up in locations, but now we got the complete list of items again. And we didn't want that. So what happened? Well, the SQL filters are not inherited to the children, and thus we cannot use them to do this kind of filtering. So what we have to do in order to fix this is go into the child and set a special SQL query where we set the location ID equals location item.location ID, and the location item counter is greater or equals to 5, and then set it to true. So then we are separately using the same SQL query to constrain the item as we are the location. And that is working, though I'm not very happy about having to do both of these, but it works. You can do that. And if you want to do a little bit more advanced constraints, you can actually do constrain location as. And then you can write some fun stuff. And let's see if I just copy this code sample in here. Now we got the wardrobes, and if we extend this, we can actually remove this and add these two. And I want to change this to basement, something like that. We can see what that does. And now we got the basement and we got the wardrobes all in one, because the basement had more than 40 and it matched the word. If we just remove the basement here and just check or contains more than 40, then we should get a few more. Yeah, then we get the attic as well, because there we have 54 items. Now we're getting to the problem where I'm kind of stuck at the moment, and that is I have a situation where I want to always show a set of locations based on actually another data dictionary that is a child to the location. So it would be like I'm having a child data dictionary that indicates active locations, and I want to filter only on the active locations. And the one way I've figured out how to kind of partially solve it is if I go into the item and I have this filter of locations, I can create a string based off these 3 items I want to use, and I can filter on that. And now I got the items I want, but I still haven't filtered the locations properly, because I only want the 3 wardrobes, 3, 4, and 17. And in order to do that, I need to use this constraint as, and I could use this constraint as like this. Let's remove that now. And if I just remove that as well, you can see that running this code gives me the 3 wardrobes and the items that I want. But the issue here is that I cannot set a variable for these things. And it's not like I can say that if I only have 2 active, then I only want to show 2 of them. So what I have to do here is, if I create this array, the array here, and now I want to move these here to set up the array. And now I want to do something like this. And I've been trying to kind of force feeding this with properties and other things. So I've been trying to use this array of items and, for instance, try to constrain on the array, but it gives me just an invalid value. So that's not allowed. If I just use the 3, then it's okay. So what I figured out is that I can use property integer. So if I set this as a property, meaning I create a property in the object here. So I could do set this one. No, that's PI location. And when I use this filter, and if I comment these out, so I only have one. So if you see, I got the property locations, and I got reading from a property. This constraint can actually work. But I want to get like the array value. So I've tried with a function or trying to get the array value out of a property, but you need to get the array into a local variable, and then it won't work. So the solution that will work here, even though it's a little bit crappy, is that I have to create like a set of variables, and then I need to change this entire procedure, like, let's comment that out like this. And I need this one. Yeah, I cannot read the local array, so I need this one to look like that. And I need this one to contain this piece of code. And if I know there is more, then I just have to expand this. And this becomes a hell of a lot of code. And I'm not really into writing a lot of code. Whoa. This is what I have to do to expand this if there is more than one. So now I should actually be able to pick both 4 and 17, and they should be and they are working both on the location data dictionary and the item data dictionary, because we're using the constraint as. But there's a lot of setting and getting these properties in order to get this to work, and these if cases grow larger and larger if my intention is to allow more users to use this. So I'm kind of stuck between this approach and making a more and more elaborate SQL query. And in this case, it works fine. But in the case that I'm in, I actually have like 4 levels below the location in this case, which means that the SQL filter that will query is kind of having a list of 1,000 or 10,000 items that I need to filter on in this filter locations, which is really not that optimal for SQL either, since I've more or less given the ID for each item that I want in the list. So if you have any good solutions on how to do this in a better way, either getting the SQL filter to actually constrain the item, or having some way where I can more easily create these properties to bind that filter using constraint as, please write it in the comments or send me an email or what have you, because I really would love that instead of being stuck with this bunch of code here. But I think we're kind of at the limit of the constraints of the constraints, because there is a lot of smart things that you can do and automate in Dataflex. And when you get out to this corner of the code, you're kind of reaching for limitations, and we'll see if anyone has a good solution that I missed out. But yeah.
I hope that was interesting and that you get some use of your new constraints. I certainly have no use of mine. So I'm going to spend the rest of the week trying to get out of this constraint mess. See you then. Bye bye.